remind ourselves our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings. And then the second two lines, we express our reason for being together here. We're sitting here because we're listening to these teachings to see if there's any tools we can take to help us develop our amazing potential so we can be of benefit to the universe. That's the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. Sangye charang soke tognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke tognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke tognam la jangcho badu dagni kyab suchi Dagi chonyen gi personam ki drola penche sange drupa shog. Okay, thank you, Mary. So purification, what does that mean? Well, like we said last night, if we look at this word Buddha, which is the end result, it's so good to remember this. It just puts us on track. Because Buddhism is so kind of, especially for us who've come from a very different culture, when you hear Tibetan Buddhism, it's just this arcane, complicated presentation of many unusual ideas, and we can't really see how they're all kind of integrated, you know. But if you think of the end result of all this work, becoming a Buddha, ridding the mind of all the rubbish and growing all the goodness, I mean, that kind of tells us the job. It tells us the method, that implies the methodology, doesn't it? So we've got to pull out all the weeds and grow the flowers. I mean, that's it. Purification is pulling out the weeds, and this phrase we often hear, creating merit, meaning is growing the flowers. I mean, in the end, all practices do both, but there are some that emphasize more the purification, and there are some that emphasize more the growing the flowers. So then another way of putting that, if, as we said last night, the Bud, the first syllable, implies the ridding from the mind of the delusions and all the nonsense, which are the cause of suffering, and which are the cause of doing actions which harm others. So that's the cause of all the karmic imprints in the mind. So ridding the mind of the karmic imprints, which is the causes of suffering and its causes, then that's the pulling out of the weeds. So we have to lessen the negative karmic imprints, lessen the deluded imprints. And then the other one is Da, implying the development to perfection of all the goodness, all the virtue, all the love, all the compassion, intelligence and kindness and all the rest. We've got to do the practices that develop that part of ourselves. So in one sense, it's quite simple. You just got to, but why it's difficult is because our minds, for the Buddhist perspective, are so habituated with delusions, with these misconceptions, about reality. You know, that's really what Buddha's saying. So, of course, as we know, if we've heard the teachings a few times, many times, that, you know, the law that runs the universe, as far as the Buddha is concerned, is this natural law of the law of cause and effect. That whatever we think and do and say brings results. So we all know that we're great experts at the law of cause and effect when it comes to making money, making lamps, making computers, growing a rose. We know the causes. We know once we learn the laws of botany, we put the causes into place, and you're going to get the result every time. We get that. It's logical. That's the Buddha's approach to happiness and suffering. His expertise about cause and effect isn't to make computers and cars. It's to get happy and stop suffering. So this is the relationship between the delusions in the mind, to get rid of those, the implication of the word, the first syllable, Buddha, and they're the cause of suffering. So we want to get rid of the suffering and its causes. And then we want to develop all the goodness, which means the virtuous states of mind, which is happiness and its causes. So it comes down to the mind. So karma is the law that runs in the mind. It's the law that runs the mind. It runs the lives and minds of all sentient beings. Or if you like, all sentient beings live within the law of this natural law of cause and effect. It's not made up by the Buddha. He's not a creator. It's something he's observed to be true. So, of course, we take it as a hypothesis in the beginning. We can't prove it to be true immediately. We're not clairvoyant. So this is our view as a Buddhist, if we choose to. So given that every millisecond of what we think and do and say, and that's it, every millisecond of what we think and do and say, body, speech, and mind, programs us, sows seeds in our mind that ripen in the future as our happiness or our suffering. I mean, that's it. Think of your life. It's really not complicated. Think of your life from the time you can remember. If you started dividing it, you divide into two categories. You could divide in your life into the experiences that you would call happy and into the experiences you call suffering. It's pretty straightforward. And if we look at our minds, look at them, and we can deduce from the behavior of the dogs and the monkeys and the ants, they're the same, that we all want happiness, we all don't want suffering. That drives everything we think and do and say. Think about it. So it's really quite straightforward, quite simple. Well, Buddha's deal is this, that every millisecond of what we think and do and say that he labels negative, and we need to understand those criteria very clearly, necessarily programs our mind, sows seeds in our mind that will ripen in the future as suffering. So the first level of practice of the Buddha, forget about compassion yet, it's compassion for ourselves. Entry level junior school grade 1. Well, listen, honeys, you want future suffering? No, Buddha. Well, this is my advice. He's a good doctor. He'll give you his advice. He recommends a half a dozen things, starting point. It's the starting point. So the broad point is he recommends stopping. If you don't want suffering in the future, Robina, given that whatever you think and do and say is the cause of it, it's pretty evident that you need to stop causing it. So his view is quite straightforward, So he says the cause of my suffering in the present is the actions that are called negative that I have done in the past. So if I don't want future suffering, and I know I don't by looking at my present life, then I'd better stop causing them. You go to your doctor, you don't want cancer. So she says, well, stop causing it, Robina. You better stop smoking, babe. Well, you better stop eating sugar if you don't want diabetes. So Buddha says, if you don't want people lie to you and steal from you in the future, don't stop stealing and stop lying. Pretty straightforward. You don't want to get harmed. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to get killed. Well, stop killing and harming. It's really quite uncomplicated. It's just that we've got to take this view on board because it's not how we think now. And if we do think about that, let's say we're Christian, then we think of it as punishment. But the Buddha's not a punisher. He's not a rewarder. He hasn't got that role. There's no such thing in Buddhism as punishment and reward, which in fact is, as we've talked very often, is the view we tend to have. We tend to think it's punishment. Don't do this. Why not? Because you'll get punished. No, Buddha says, don't do this. Why not? Because it'll harm you, baby. Because you're the boss. You're the harmer, and you're the harmer. You're the one who harms yourself, and you're the one who helps yourself. We are the boss for the Buddha. So this is what it underpins this whole idea then of abiding by the laws of karma. So the first level, entry level, junior school, grade 1 level of Buddhism is back off and leave sentient beings alone, please. Don't kill, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, don't lie, don't badmouth, don't talk behind backs, don't abuse. Straightforward, actions of body and speech, that's his first level of practice, Buddha's first recommendation. He exhorts us not to do those actions. Why, Buddha? Because, Robina Petal, they will cause you future suffering. That's the logic behind not, deciding to buy into Buddha's views and, not obey what he says. He's not the boss. We've really got to hear that. It's very hard for us to hear this because we're used to doing something that someone says. You do this because your mother said so. If you don't, you get punished. You do this because God said so. You don't, you get punished. That's not the Buddha's view. It's because it'll harm you. So this attitude should bring like self-respect. It's like compassion for yourself. I am sick of suffering, so I'm going to stop causing it. It's the first level. So it's the first level of practice. In other words, you don't want weeds in your garden in the future. You better stop planting them. It's kind of so logical, it's embarrassing. But that's the first practice. But that's not enough because we've been sowing seeds in this damn mind of ours for countless lifetimes, Buddha says. In this particular life, how fortunate that we got a human body. We won the lottery virtually, but we didn't really. We caused it from virtue in the past. We got a human mummy and daddy. That's the result of our own past virtue and, very strong, non-harming, non-killing actions is what caused us to get the human body and fortunately to have access to these virtues in our mind. That's the miracle of this human life. So given that, then at least we've got the opportunity to see this life and to make some decisions, So we've got the human body because of virtue. We want at least another human body in the future because our mind will continue, Buddha says. So then we want to create the causes for it. So this first level isn't about what will I do, what positive things will I do? It's no, first level is what negative things will I stop doing? That's the first thing when, if you go to your doctor, she doesn't start giving you all these, the first thing she tells you to do, if she sees that you're smoking, that'll cause you cancer. She just doesn't start to tell you to do other things. No, she just says, first thing is stop smoking. Stop eating sugar. Stop doing the things that will cause you future suffering. And then once you've pulled out a few weeds, you've got a bit of space in your garden, then you can do more work. But given that we've got this mind that goes back from beginningless time, Buddha says, and given that every millisecond of what we've ever thought and said and done has sowed seeds in our mind and none of them go astray. And so the whole bunch of them are there waiting to ripen. So we've got this human body and certain conditions and certain seeds have ripened in this particular life. Well, we have billions of other seeds that are just there latent, waiting for the conditions to manifest for us to have more suffering. Well, we do not want those. So the next level of practice, first is at least stop sowing more weeds. The next level is start putting atomic bombs under the weeds we've already planted before they ripen. And that's purification. So you've got to first stop smoking cigarettes, and then your doctor will give you all sorts of methods to help do, the sugar, let's say. Stop eating the bad food at first, then she'll start giving you the good foods to eat. That's how you create merit. So you've got to purify and create merit. But here, we're going to stop. The fundamental one, stop killing, stop stealing, stop lying. And then next, after that, you get some space. Now start taking care of the seeds you've already planted to prevent them from ripening. It's really intelligent, taking this view of the Buddhas. So that's purification. So then, because we're so familiar, if we've been good Christians, I was a Catholic, I love my Catholic upbringing, because I'm so familiar with the concept of purification is, and what heals me is God forgiving me. We're very used to that. So when I'm naughty and I have to beg mummy to forgive me, but that's not the approach here. Buddha is a nice person. He would forgive you, but that's not the discussion here. It's not his job. That's like going to your doctor and asking her to forgive you for smoking, thinking that that will heal your cancer. No. If there's a creator, that is the appropriate relationship to have with the creator. Nothing wrong with that. But Buddha's not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. We don't need creating. We do fine creating our own mess, and we can do fine creating our own happiness. We're the boss, So the process of purification is one that we do ourselves. As Lama Yeshe says, we create negativity first with the mind. Of course, the body and speech are the servants of our mind, and they do the troubles. They create the problems, but the mind is the thing. So we create negativity with our mind. Well, guess what? We purify it by creating positivity with our mind. It's really fundamental. It's really logical, So what's involved then? Well, there's this wonderful practice that we do. And as Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do it every day. It's, a good way to remember it. I don't know where I got this from somebody. It's just the 4 R's. It's a nice way to remember it, The first one is regret. The second one is reliance. The third is the remedy. And the fourth is resolve. So it's a good way to remember. You can call them different names. It's okay. So, and there's different order that they're presented in. Sometimes when we say or present in a different way, but I find this very practical. So the first step, and this is why, the Lamas always use the analogy of if you've taken poison. So we know logically that poison is something that will harm you terribly. So it's a really good analogy. So if you've taken poison, the first step is you have to acknowledge that you did it. And that's what regret is, which sounds interesting because we often think of regret as guilt. And this is a really crucial point. We have to really distinguish clearly the difference between this attitude of regret and this view that we are very familiar with called guilt. So what is guilt? We recognize it very well. It's simply anger, but you're the object. If I say to you, you did this and you did that and you did this, and then I conclude and you're a bad person, that's anger, blame. So what we do is we go, We look in the past and we go, I did this and I did that and I did this. And then we conclude, and I'm a bad person. Well, that's the logic of anger. And that is a view of ego grasping. It's a manifestation of the view of I, and it manifests as this blame. And we run to this automatically. Don't blame, I always say it, but don't blame your Catholic mother, your Jewish mother for this. It's the function of ego grasping to have this dualistic view and then to over exaggerate our badness. That's what aversion, that's what anger, that's what guilt do. They over exaggerate the badness of somebody. Anger normally is another person, guilt is the self. And we run to this automatically. No one teaches it. So we really have to consciously change it. So regret is a very marvelous attitude, but it takes us time to hear it. So regret, you look in the past, it's the same. And you go, I did this, and I did do this, and I did do that, and I did cheat on my boyfriend, and I did badmouth, and I did steal, and I did kill that baby, or whatever. Actions that are, because a negative action by definition for the Buddha, remember, we should do this first. Let's just be clear about this first. What is a negative action? Okay, it's a really important question. What defines an action as negative, as opposed to what is an action that's defined as positive? There's a third category called neutral, but we don't worry about that here. So a negative action by definition, the heaviest level, is one that harms another. That's why Buddha exhorts us to not kill, not take the ungiven, as the Tibetans call stealing, not jump on the wrong partner. 3 of the body, just 3. They're the heaviest level of negative actions because they harm others. But not every negative action harms others. All negative actions harm oneself. And this is the point here. I mean, eating 14 pieces of cake is not, the cake doesn't mind, but you're creating negativity because you're following attachment and you desperately, trying to make yourself happy, which is all you do is make yourself miserable. So that's called a negative action. Abusing yourself. Of course, it's a negative action. Hating yourself, putting yourself down. We love to do that. Of course, it's a negative action. Why? Because it's an action that is driven by a delusion. That's the broader definition. Any action driven by anger, attachment, guilt, jealousy, depression, low self-esteem, you name it. That's the broader definition of a negative action. But the heaviest level are ones that harm others. And they are the ones that ripen in the future as our being harmed by others in return. Because that's what we mean by suffering. So negative action, we've got to, we want to stop doing those. And now we want to purify the karmic seeds we have planted in the past by doing negative actions, because those seeds are sitting there waiting to ripen. We don't want that, thank you. We're sick of suffering, The main motivation behind purification is I am sick of suffering. That's why you go to the doctor. That's why you stop eating sugar. That's why you try to purify your health. Same logic here. Sick of suffering. So this first one of regret is then accountability. If you can't own the fact that you took poison, we tend in our life, when it comes to negativity, we have 3 kind of responses. One is blame. It's your fault that I did this. One is guilt. It's all my fault. Or one is denial, because we can't bear the pain. There are 3 options. So imagine how foolish you would be if you'd taken poison and someone pointed it out and you said, who put poison in my dinner? Meanwhile, you're dying an agonizing death and you're determined to find who put it in there. Somehow that makes you feel better. Like you're still smoking cigarettes through the hole in your cancerous throat and you're still continuing to sue Marlboro. Fine, I hope you get some money before you die. So accountability, to say, who put poison in my dinner is completely meaningless. It's harming you right now. So you've got to take responsibility. And whoever put it in there, find out later. Meanwhile, do something about it, please. The other one is guilt. I'm a bad person. I ate poison. Can you imagine how foolish that would be? You're sitting there every day being guilty about eating poison, but doing nothing about it, because guilt and blame are completely not active. They're just sitting in your misery. There's no action involved. And denial, can you imagine how foolish if someone points out you ate poison? I did not. This is how we live our lives, So regret is this wholesome attitude that recognizes I did that foolish thing. I ate that sugar. I killed my boyfriend. I badmouthed my sister. Whatever it might be that's labeled an action that was driven by your delusions, that leaves an imprint in your mind that will ripen as that kind of suffering for you. Thank you. So regret is acknowledging that you did it, owning it. But then the conclusion, not, oh, I'm a bad person. No, or not, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That's how we tend to think of regret. That's meaningless. What's the point of saying you shouldn't have done it? That's anger. When your kid does something wrong and the mother shouts, you shouldn't have done that. What good is it? You've done it. Now let's find a solution. That's anger. That's useless. So regret is acknowledging I did do that action out of my own foolishness, because of my own ignorance, because I didn't realize when I did it. So it's like compassion for yourself, but it's accountability. And then naturally the next conclusion, the next step is, what can I do to change it? What can I do, not change it, fix it? Whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor I can rely upon to give me the antidote? That's intelligent. That's intelligent. And that should be the immediate response. Then that's really wholesome. That's the first step. That's regret. But that takes us time, because another aspect that we find weird about that, because it's compassion for yourself, or we think, oh, but that's just selfish. I should be having compassion for others, the fact that I harm them. Yes, you should, but that comes second. First, compassion for yourself, please. And this is the whole basis of the first level of practice in Buddha's teachings in the Lam Rim. Renunciation is recognizing the things you did that will cause you future suffering, and you want to give it up because you're sick of suffering. You have to have very powerful wish to give up suffering and its causes, which is compassion for yourself. The Lamas don't call it that, but we understand that. This is crucial. You can't skip over that step. You can't just leap to compassion for others, because compassion for others is based upon understanding karma. For yourself first. This is crucial. And it's a common mistake we make in the West, you know. Excuse me, I have to take a drink. Excuse me. Okay. So regret is, you know, so what are we regretting? Think about it. Well, we're taking the, you know, classic Buddhist presentation of these non-virtues, this first level of practice in Buddha's teachings. He gives this little list of 10 don'ts. This is a good way to start, you know. The first 7 are the body and speech. The last 3 are the sort of the beginnings of the mind. Thanks. So we can go through that list if you like, and when you do the practice yourself, you can do it this way, or you can just do it in your own way. Because you're basically in this practice, you're talking to yourself. You're being your own friend. That's the way I tend to think of this practice. You are doing it for yourself. You do it at the end of the day, and there are ways to do it very formally with your sadhana and your bells and your Sanskrit and stuff. I think it's far better to do it in a very personal way, like very, very, very down to earth psychology. Really make it human. Not just do it mindlessly like some religious practice. You know, it's very meaningful, very powerful to go through these 4 steps. So this first one is, you know, regretting, acknowledging, and that's painful because if you have a fight with your boyfriend all the time and you're sick of it, and you're mad at your sister or something, it's kind of we're all tight and knotted up about it by the end of the day. So we've got to own our part of it. Your sister might be a creep, I agree. Your boyfriend might be terrible, worse than you, but you've got to own your piece of it. And this is what's difficult in very intense relationships. We tend to want to blame, we get them all mixed up. We've got to own our piece of it. This is very important, very powerful. And the regret is based upon kind of knowing you did this out of your own foolishness, out of your own habit. It's just habit, you know, or especially if it's something in the past. I mean, I always think about, say, killing. I mean, I've not killed other humans, except I did kill a baby when I was 23. I had an abortion, you know. For Buddha, that's a human being, because the egg and the sperm join the consciousness at the time. That's what conception means, you know. So pretty much it's a human from day one. So at the time, I didn't think about it as a baby. I didn't think about it as a human. I knew it was a human. I didn't think about it like that. I just knew I didn't want what came out after 9 months, you know. So I went to the hospital, and when I was in England, and then I was on the National Health when I was in my 20s. So I decided to have an abortion, you know. So I didn't think about it. I was sad at the time. I didn't really think it through. And then when I came to being a Buddhist and think about killing, and I recognized, indeed, I did do that. And it was out of ignorance. I didn't have vicious anger. I didn't want to harm anybody. And that's often what happens, but it's out of ignorance, you know. I didn't think about it then. So that seed was sown. I created the cause for more harm because the doctors and nurses had to do it. So they had to kill the baby for me. And that's making other people create negative karma. So that's something I always regret. I remember, because I mean, that's just one I can remember. If we've got countless lives, then we've done countless of these actions before. But we think of the ones we know, that's a good, and then we think of all the ones we've done that we don't remember, you know, and you regret it. Why? You say to yourself, I regret having done that. I say to myself, I regret having done that. Then you've got to say why. Otherwise it just feels like guilt, because I don't want the future suffering. I don't want that seed to stay in my mind. I don't want that to pollute my mind. I don't want future suffering. And what are the suffering results of killing? Well, there are 4 kinds of ways karma ripens. 4 ways, just 4. One is a type of rebirth. One is a tendency to keep doing it. One is it happening to you. And one is an environmental result. Well, I know in the 4 results of killing, lower realm rebirth. Don't want that. I don't want to have the tendency to keep killing. I do not want to get killed or die young. Very simple. And I don't want to get sick and live in a disgusting environment when the physical world harms us. I mean, look at COVID-19 right now. This is the collective karmic result of killing for all of the whole planet, you know. There's millions of human beings who are suffering from the results of it. Well, those broadly, if we're living in an environment that is harming us, we might actually die. That's the environmental result of killing. Actually being killed or dying young, that's the result of people having COVID-19. That's the result of killing. So we know we don't want those results. Okay, we find it a bit abstract to think about lower realms, but if we have confidence in the Buddhist teachings, we'll win that one as well. Think about it. So I know I don't want those results. So of course I'm going to regret killing, because I don't want the results. That's the point of regret. It's related to yourself, and you don't want future suffering. So then you think of all the other actions you do today. I badmouthed my boyfriend. I did this. I didn't give the pencil back. Whatever you've done, you know. Maybe you've been a fisherman. Maybe you've been in the military. Lots of killing. Maybe you've stolen. Maybe you haven't paid your taxes. I mean, that's a very common thing. We try to cheat all the time, thinking we're being so holy. But I mean, regretting whatever actions we've done that have harmed sentient beings based on delusions, which is actions of killing, cheating on partners or raping, taking the ungiven, lying, bad-mouthing, abusive language, rabbiting on about nothing, just kind of boring people, even if they don't want to hear what you have to say, just meaningless talk, bad-mouthing behind backs. We do all these things, you know. So we regret all these. We regret them. We think, I did that and this and this. And anytime, all the actions I've done are like that, I regret from the depths of my heart because I do not want future suffering. That's what you ought to spell out, because that's the meaning of regret. You don't just say, oh, I regret it, because we don't know what we mean by it. We think of it as guilt. It's useless, useless, useless. It's very precise. And it's kind to yourself. And it's accountability. It's growing up, being your own friend. And then, of course, if you have confidence in other rebirths, you can think, in whatever I've done since beginningless time to harm any sentient being ever with my body and speech, I don't want those seeds to ripen. Of course I don't. No way. So of course I regret from the depths of my heart, because I am sick of suffering. That's regret. It's very wholesome, very kind to yourself. Nothing to do with blame, nothing to do with anger, nothing to do with guilt, nothing. It's kindness. It's accountability. Because we produce our own suffering and we produce our own happiness. Now the second step, reliance. So the conclusion from all this, well, God, whom can I turn to? Where's my doctor? And this is our relationship with the Buddha in many, many ways. There's different ways of describing your relationship with the Buddha, or indeed with your teacher, who is the Buddha for you. And one of them is this one of relying upon as like a mentor or a doctor. It's a very good analogy. Not as a person who will make it go away. Not as a person. I mean, as a Catholic, I loved being a Catholic. I loved going to confession. I loved confessing. I loved getting my penance. I loved purifying. I loved getting God's forgiveness. It's not similar but different here. It's not that decision. It's not that aspect at all. You do the work. You rely upon the Buddha. You need a really good doctor, guaranteed, but you do the work. You do the purifying. They give you they give you the recipe, the remedy. You do the work. It's so important to remember this. So you rely upon the Buddha. So of course, in this meditation, we'll just, even as we're talking, you should be doing it as I'm discussing. We'll just do it very briefly when we'll finish we'll finish at the end. Well, just a short version of it, but we're doing it even now as we're talking, okay? So now we visualize Buddha above our head, and there's this classic meditation we all are familiar with if we're Tibetan Buddhists, where we use the Buddha from the Bodhisattva path, not the Buddha as Shakyamuni Buddha, but the Buddha in the Bodhisattva aspect, looking gorgeous, and he's called Vajrasattva. He's really this is the tantric aspect of the Buddha, who's behind me here, look, my version, the monk. That's the sutra aspect. The Bodhisattva tantric aspect is he's looking very gorgeous, looking beautiful, like we did last night, Tara, for example. Similar style. So here's the tantric aspect of the Buddha. and very beautiful, very radiant, white light body, sitting in Vajra position on a multicolored lotus. Above our head, and his left hand is a bell, and his right hand is a Vajra, crossed at his heart, which is the union of the two truths, the union of wisdom and compassion, enlightenment. It represents this. So we visualize him above our head, and then we take refuge. We remind ourselves. In other words, what refuge is you're delighting in having a decent doctor. You're delighting. Wow, fancy, I've got such a good doctor. I'm so happy. And you rely upon that doctor. You say a formal refuge prayer, whatever you like. Now, the second part of reliance, there's two parts, 2A and 2B. So 2B is actually now where you have compassion for others. And it's a bit odd that it's under the heading reliance. But let me explain. This sometimes seems quite complicated to us. Why they call it reliance is this. The way they talk. So the first level of practice, regret, is actually the junior school, high school level, the Hinayana stages, the renunciation level, the first stages of the Lam Rim, where you learn about karma and the mind. That's that component, and that's where we get renunciation, giving up suffering and its causes. Now we're going to the Bodhisattva path. The second part is the compassion, is now the Bodhisattva wing, compassion. So first we regretted the things we have done that will harm us. Now, if you like, you're going to regret because of what you've done that will harm others. And this will generate compassion in your heart for others. This is the next one. It's more advanced. So why is it under the heading reliance? It's kind of peculiar. So they talk about it like this. When you're on the Bodhisattva path, when you want to help others, then you want to cultivate compassion. This is very logical. You want to cultivate compassion. Well, what's compassion? Compassion is this powerful wish that others not suffer. It's empathy with others' suffering. That's what compassion is. So now, they talk about it like this. If you're going to cultivate compassion, if you want to cultivate compassion in your mind, what do you need? You need to know about and see suffering sentient beings. So in that sense, you rely upon suffering sentient beings in order to cultivate compassion. Compassion is what you have to cultivate. You need bucket loads of compassion. So the more suffering you know about, the more suffering you see, that's grist for the mill for you to get compassion in your heart. That's why they call reliance upon. You rely upon sentient beings. In other words, if you want to be the best doctor on the planet, you learn to heal people, don't you? Now, if you never met a suffering person, how can you heal anybody? You're useless. Your hands are tied. So you need suffering people. You rely upon suffering people in order to be the best doctor, to heal people. And that's the meaning. When we think it through, it's got logic. We just don't think it like that. So we need to cultivate compassion. The more compassion, the more powerful. That means the more there is suffering and the deeper we see suffering. But what's interesting about this, the level of our capacity of compassion is completely dependent upon the renunciation we get from seeing our suffering and being sick of it. So the more we know about our suffering, the more we know about negative karma, the more we know about the law of karma, the more we know about how we will suffer unless we purify, the more compassion we can have. Your compassion is limited by your level of renunciation. That's why you've got to have renunciation first. Because the more you have it for yourself, the more you look around the world and you go, oh my God, we're all in the same boat. Look at these crazy human beings, sentient beings, harming themselves, not realizing it. That's the real meaning of seeing suffering, that we are harming ourselves, and we break our hearts with renunciation. Now with compassion, we break our hearts for others. Because out of our ignorance, sentient beings are running around blaming everybody else. But we are all, every one of us in the universe, experiencing the fruits of our own past actions. Our happiness as well. But we learn about the suffering first. It's a very powerful concept. So compassion, and you think of those you harmed, the baby I aborted. Okay, they created the cause to come to my womb. Absolutely, it was an interdependent scenario, and that's why it's not guilt, because they created the cause. They're part of the deal. If they hadn't created the cause to get killed by me, they would not have come to my womb and I would not have had an abortion. So I'm blaming them, but I'm seeing my role in it. And now I see the harm I caused that person. They caused it. They came to my womb. They created the cause for me to kill them, definitely. They had the karma to be killed because it harmed me. It could not have happened otherwise. So that's their part. But I have compassion now for them, from the having them done it in the past, and now the suffering I caused that person. And even remember, when I had the abortion, I had the D&C, they didn't do it properly. They didn't scrape it out properly. They had to do another one. So this poor little fetus suffered terribly. So I have compassion, there's no question. And then of all the other beings I've harmed, the people I've cheated on, the people I've lied to, the people I've abused, the people I've stolen from, whatever. You think of them. You think of the sentient beings you've harmed, and you have compassion for them. You're regretting for their sake now. And if you can, now, if you can, have compassion for those who've harmed you. That's the best compassion. Why? Logical. Because guess what? They will suffer terribly in the future because of the harm they've done to me. That's the basis for compassion. If we can. It's very powerful. Third step, the remedy. And that's when we do the meditation. And we'll do that at the end. The remedy is, the remedy is the actual, you visualize. And here, okay, the remedy is often, this is the step actually usually is called the antidote. So, if you're regretting killing, one of the antidotes is to try and save lives. So throughout your life, you'll try and save lives. You'll go buy some worms and release them. You'll go buy some lobsters and release them. You'll help sick people. That's the antidote to harming others. So obviously the opposite of something is the antidote, isn't it? If you're going to, if you're regretting lying during your life, you make sure you tell the truth. That's an antidote. But this particular third step, the antidote, the remedy, this is, all the lamas and all the traditions praise this particular meditation, utilizing the Buddha Bodhisattva. In general, any practice where we use the Buddha is infinitely more powerful than any other practice because of the power they call the power of the object. We need to think about that. The power of enlightened beings, the countless beings like you and me who've perfected themselves and who've become Buddhas, whose consciousnesses are existing because consciousness is beginningless and endless. So they're existing, doing their job, benefiting sentient beings, So any practice we use relying upon them, any practice we use visualizing the Buddha, in this case, this particular practice, which we'll do at the end, we visualize nectar coming. Let's use our creative imagination. We visualize nectar coming and purifying while we recite the mantra. So mantra, it's Sanskrit. All these, Buddhism's been in Tibet for like 1300 plus years, but they've never translated the mantras, which are all in Sanskrit. And there's something very powerful said to be about Sanskrit, the sound of Sanskrit. In Tantra, they talk about, how we've got this subtle wind energy coursing through these 72,000 subtle channels in our body. And these wind energies are connected to our mind. They're coursing through all these channels. There's a particular way they talk in the Tibetan medical system too. So whatever we do with our mind impacts upon those wind energies, So Sanskrit is said to be this superpower. It's the meaning of sound. Mantra is the purest of sound, apparently, according to the Buddhists. The Sanskrit sounds. So that's why the Tibetans have never translated them. You can translate them, but they always say the Sanskrit. So the sound is mantra because it's the wind energy. And if there's no wind, there's no prana. There's no wind, there's no sound. So it's very pure, and because anything we do with our speech, even our mind, will have an effect on the wind energies, and that in turn has an effect on our ill health or our health in the future. As Lama Zopa says, even in the Kala Chakra Tantra, there are detailed descriptions, he says, of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. And this is taking the model of how we're made in the Vajrayana model, as well as this is the Tibetan medical system. So we've got this gross body and mind, and we have subtle body and mind. And the subtle body, as I said, is those 72,000 subtle channels, like a subtle nervous system coursing through our body. And then coursing through those channels are these different winds, or different prana. And our minds, our different states of mind, are linked to those winds inextricably. So your Tibetan doctor, when she feels your pulses, she can feel the imbalance of your wind energy, and she knows it's connected to your attachment mind. That's why you're having anxiety and panic attacks. Or she can feel the imbalance of the wind connected to your anger. That's why you're having certain diseases. It's a very subtle way of diagnosing. It's similar to the Chinese one. So whatever your mind does impacts upon those winds, or even just your mind being angry thoughts pollute your wind energies, causing future sickness, and in turn causing suffering, rebirths, and even further, more long-term, impacting upon the external elements, which is what causes the imbalance of the external world. And this is, the imbalance of the external, the pollution of the external elements, or the disharmony of the elements. All of it is a result of the minds of sentient beings, So everything we think for sure, and speak for sure, has impact on what goes on inside us, So mantra, Very powerful, said to be super powerful. And of course, you can translate them pretty simply. But I mean, I remember one time I had a commentary an entire weekend with one Lama simply on Om Mani Padme Hum, the compassion mantra. And it was he gave a commentary the entire weekend, 16 hours of teachings, was the entire path to enlightenment contained in Om Mani Padme Hum. I mean, I was, blew my mind. So there's many levels of meanings in these mantras. So this one is said to be super powerful because it's particularly related to emptiness. And this is the point about real purification. We finally purify. It's when we've cut the root of ego grasping. We've cut the root of all suffering and its causes when we've had our direct non-conceptual realization of emptiness. That's the real purification. This practice kind of puts atomic bombs under the seeds and prevents them from ripening. But until you've realized emptiness, negativity will never stop. But you can calm it all down, pull out the weeds. Or put bombs under the weeds. So Vajrasattva represents that, I think, related to emptiness in particular. So it's super, super powerful. The visualization of all this nectar coming and the recitation of that mantra. That's said to be the most potent of the antidotes, this third step, the remedy. The fourth one, Pabonka Rinpoche says, the most important. It's the resolve, determination to not do it again. I mean, this is a no-brainer, So what's interesting about these 4 steps, these 4 stages of purification, they each specifically purify one of the 4 ways that karma ripens. So like I said before, there are 4 ways our actions ripen, happy or suffering. One is a type of rebirth. One is the tendency to keep doing it. One is it happening to you. And one is the environmental result. So the first one, regret, purifies the one where it happens to you. It's called experiences similar to the cause. So if let's say, this is very powerful. We can think about our daily experiences. Let's say at work, someone's mean to you. This happens to so many people. Even your next door neighbor or your sister or your husband accuse you of doing something you didn't do, or don't believe your words, for example, convince you're lying. I mean, we know it's horrible because we know we're not lying, and you can't believe that they're not believing you. And we go crazy trying to change their mind. Well, it's the fruit, experience similar to the cause. Obviously, if a person isn't believing you, it's not because you're not lying now, it's because you've got the karma from the past action of lying to them. Then now the karmic result for you is they don't believe you now, even if you're telling the truth. So instead of trying to bash them into believing you, why not purify the cause of it? So regretting, and this is very powerful because it makes you more accountable instead of feeling this hopeless victim. You know you don't want that suffering. You know it's unbearable being accused of lying when you're not. So what you do in your practice at the end of the day, you think, whatever I did in the past, whatever life it was, whatever lying I did, I don't remember which life it was, could have been 52 lives ago, I regret having done that. And why? Because guess what? I don't want this suffering. I know it's right now I don't want it. So you regret the cause of it. Well, don't be surprised if things start to change. Because the main reason things happen is your past action. Karma is always the first cause. So you can bash them up as much as you like and demand and go to court, and they will still never believe you. But if you purify the cause, don't be surprised it starts to change. Certainly in the future, people will always believe you. You'll never get the result in the future, but you can even start to see the changes now. And it's very powerful for yourself. Instead of feeling like a victim, you own the cause of it, which is your past action. Because the logic of the Buddha is whatever we experience, any second of happiness, any second of suffering in our life, the main cause every time is your past action. So people, for example, the 4 results of non-killing, the 4 results of conscious intentional non-killing is your past non-killing. The first one is you get a human body. The main cause of that is not your mummy and daddy. That's because you've not killed in the past. You're the main cause of getting a human body. Second, you're born with no tendency to kill. How incredible, how rare on this planet. Main cause of that isn't because your mummy and daddy got nice genes. It's because you have kept the vow of non-killing in the past and you wake up in this life with no thought to kill. You are the main cause. Third, you don't die young and you don't get killed. Main cause of that is your past non-killing. Not because you live in a nice suburb where no rapists around and no murderers and no gangsters. you're the main cause. Fourth, you're healthy and fat, and whatever eats you nourishes you. Whatever you eat nourishes you. The main cause of that is your past non-killing. So whatever the experience is, that environmental, negative or positive, you're the main cause. Second, happiness, good tendencies, or bad things happening, good things happening, you're the main cause. Third one, the second one, whatever, the tendency, you're the main cause. And your human body itself, or lower realm body, you're the main cause. It's a very difficult view, very different view. We're not used to thinking it, So the first one, regretting the actions you've done, that purifies those happening to you, the experiences similar to the cause. The second one, the second step in the four opponent powers, which is the compassion for others and the refuge. Compassion for others, this seems to be the one that purifies environmental result. That's what they say. Third one, that purifies the lower realms. Fourth one, obvious. If you vow never to kill again, guess what? You're programming your mind with a habit to never kill again. So what's that going to purify? The tendency to kill. It's sort of pretty obvious, pretty logical. So now you better ask me some questions. That's it. We did it. Now you have to ask questions. It's the purification process. There have to be questions because there are always many misunderstandings. Because I talk too fast as well. So come on, people, ask me questions.
I have a question.
Who's I? Where are you?
Mary Ellen.
There, Mary Ellen. Hi, sweetheart.
Right. So when you're doing purification practices over and over and over and over again,
yes,
I think of it having like a heap of stones in front of me, and I think of something, and then I go through the process and I move it to the other side, and I keep on doing that until I've gotten rid of all of those stones. And then when I start up again, I feel like I'm pulling them back from the finished pile and doing them over and over again.
That's terrible like that. But that's terrible. So then, Mary Ellen, that's really self-existent. That's really kind of so concrete. Think of it like this. If you were playing the piano, and let's say you learned wrongly to play the piano, you're addicted to playing the piano wrongly. And that's really what Buddha's saying. We're addicted to doing things wrongly. So the habits are very deep. So you've learned this piece of bark and everything's a mess and you're completely addicted to it. So purification, first you've got to own the fact that you're doing it wrongly. You've got to own that fact. Out of your own foolishness, you've been doing it wrongly all this time. That every time you own it and every time you own that, surely that weakens the whole process, doesn't it? Wouldn't you agree? Second, now, okay, you're going to rely upon Bach, his music. You're going to rely upon him and you're going to try and follow his instructions. But okay, forget the compassion component there. But the third one is the actual practice here in terms of music is you've got to play the right note. You've got to, every time you play the right note, you're not just taking the bad note and putting it over to the other side. You're directly applying the antidote, the exact antidote to playing it wrong. By relying upon Bach, you play it right. So you're weakening the whole process. You can't just, so then the fourth one is you vow never to play it wrong again. You're going to watch like a hawk. So you can't ever say that already is an organic process that has weakened the tendency and has strengthened the right tendency. It's not as if you then go back to square one again. It feels like that because we're very stuck in self-existent view, but it can't be like this. Every time you do that, you're weakening the tendency to lie. You're weakening the tendency to steal. In fact, far more powerfully than we ever imagined. We might still feel, you're not saying this, but many people say, oh, how can that be? I'm still a bad person, you're not saying that, but in a way you are. I always remember one fellow who emailed me one time, very dear man, who talked about some terrible thing he did 20 years ago. He didn't tell me what it was. And since then, he's talked about in the letter, I had terrible regret. So I've worked for Buddhist centers. I've helped other people. He did so many things for 20 years, but he still concluded in that email, but I'm still a bad person. That's schizophrenic, because if you've been stopping playing the wrong music and, relying upon Bach and consciously playing the right music and vowing never to play the wrong music again, or for as much as you can, then it's already a powerful organic process. Powerful change is occurring. But we have the view, I'm still a bad person. That's self-existent, and that's the worst one of all. That's the worst one. It's just not logical, because you see, negativity is also a dependent arising. Negativity is also empty of existing from its own side. But because we have the ego grasping the belief, I'm a bad person, what's the point of purifying? Why bother thinking I'm still a bad person? That's like saying you're practicing Bach for 20 years beautifully, but you're still convinced of that action you did 20 years ago. You still define yourself by that. That's demented. It's dependent arising, Mary Ellen. We mightn't see the change or feel it because it's happening very deep. It's putting atomic bombs under the tendencies, you know. But we've got to have confidence in that process. And as Lama Zopa says, and this sounds so weird to us, when we're doing the purification, when you do each step, as Lama Yeshe put it, the power of purification is the power, the strength of your regret, the strength of your compassion and reliance, the strength of the visualization and the recitation, and the strength of your determination to change. So it's the strength of your mind that purifies it. If you just do it like an objective thing, oh, I'm a, you know, it's like if you try to chop a tree, you put the axe on the big tree, touch it. Oh, I did my purification today. No, you didn't. But if you whack it as much power as possible, you're really getting somewhere. So it's the power of our mind. That's the point. The power of our mind is what purifies. But we think it's set in stone. We think it's self-existent. Do you understand? Good. So have confidence. Have confidence. Have confidence in each of the 4 steps. That's what purifies, Mary Ellen. It's not Buddha, it's us. The strength of our own mind and our conviction. It's not fantasy. I mean, if you're thinking fantasy, oh look, I purified, I'm a Buddha now, then you're in trouble. But it's a logical process. The more power you put into regretting you're playing the wrong music, the more you convince that Bach is good, the more you put energy into playing it properly, and the more you watch like a hawk to not play it badly again. That's how you play the piano. That's how you achieve everything. Do you understand? Good. But also don't expect magic to suddenly appear like you're a Buddha overnight. No, it won't happen, because the habits are very deep. And that's why the 4th step, as Lama Zopa says, don't lie to yourself. Don't say, I will never badmouth my husband again if it's your favorite habit. You be realistic with yourself, and you give yourself a proper timeline, and you even do it 5 minutes at a time. You be very realistic with yourself. And that's why it's, like the AA thing, you only ever say, I'm not going to drink for 24 hours, So it's very helpful for the mind to be realistic. Some vows you can say, I will never kill again. Others, maybe, with lying, maybe it's your worst habit. You're really used to lying. You be realistic to yourself, and you watch like a hawk. And then we see that. So that's the purification. The power of purification is so stupendous. As Lama Zopa says, we're insane not to do this every day. And what it is your mind consciously engaging, consciously being conscious of what you're thinking and doing and saying. It's very marvelous, really. Do you understand? And then, of course, Mary Ellen, this is strengthened magnificently by living in vows, which is another discussion. It's not the topic here. But this is why, as Lama Zopa says, we just being a nice person isn't enough. So purification on its own is not enough unless you're living in vows. So the two together are the most potent, powerful, marvelous way to live a life. Because vows, you see, karma is intention. The real meaning of the word karma, action, is mental action. I will, volition. Intention here doesn't mean like motivation. It means I will. And the intention is in our mind every millisecond, driving everything we think and do and say. Of course, 99% of it we're not familiar with because we're programmed. We're just instinctive. So we need to consciously, actively, consciously create as many non-harming actions as possible, and particularly non-killing, just to get another human body. So at the end of our death, the end of our life, we need bucket loads of rich, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds just to get have enough virtue in order to get a human body again, just to get that. So, the only way to do it is in the context of living in vows, Lama Zopa says. Buddha says, so Rinpoche put it this way one time. A person could be doing bucket loads of practice, lots of spiritual practice, day and night, but doesn't live in a vow, doesn't have a vow not to kill. Another person merely with a vow not to kill, but not much other practice, because of the power of vows, and this is Buddha's teaching, the person is creating infinite more virtuous karma and purifying infinitely more powerfully than the person without a vow. And the logic is this. The only time you create the karma of not killing, and you need bucket loads of those in your bank vault when you die, just to get a human body. The only time without a vow you create the virtuous karma of not killing is when you see the creature, you see the mosquito, or you see the ex-boyfriend, and you consciously say, I must not kill. Then that's intention. That's mental action. That's intention. I will not kill. But if throughout the day, like right now, sitting in our little houses, I mean, I've got a few ants here, you know, that's it. I don't have, I mean, in India, in the rainy season, it's like living in Jurassic Park. You are bombarded day and night by living creatures. When you go, I'll never forget when I went to the Bodh Gaya stupa. And at dusk, these billions of big fat flying creatures come crashing down onto you and the ground. And it's like a carpet. You can't even walk an inch without thinking, I must not kill. You've got to navigate through these creatures. You know, I'll never forget it, the number of creatures in tropical, on certain kind of worlds. Here, a few ants I meet, that's it. So if I don't have any vows, only when I meet the ant and make a decision, I must not kill it. That's when I create the virtue of not killing. But because our virtue, and because the main thing that determines the virtue we create is the motivation, and because our compassion isn't that great, then the actions we create without living in vows are very weak. Whereas if you have a vow, this is Buddha's teaching, and you sit there in front of somebody, having taken refuge, and that person represents the Buddha for you, and that person got it from their teacher, and they got it from their teacher, and they got it from their teacher, and you could track back this unbroken chain of humans right back to the time of the Buddha, as if you're taking the vows from Buddha himself. So those vows have such power, the way Buddha talks it. They even say in the teachings that vows are like a subtle physical form visible to clairvoyance. There's something so potent. And the fact is, as Rinpoche says, that when you've got vows and you've got them in your mind stream, they're powerful 24 hours a day, that you're keeping those vows when you're sleeping, when you're on the toilet, when you're down at the pub having a beer with your boyfriend, assuming you're not breaking your vow not to drink. You are ticking over virtuous karmic seeds of non-killing 24 hours a day and putting atomic bombs under the habit of killing. So vows are like stupendous. We can't get without vows. We can't get ahead of the game without vows. Being good is not enough, the way Rinpoche puts it. So living in vows of morality, already you're purifying gigantically. And then at the end of the day, doing your purification, you couldn't wish for a better practice. You can sit back and watch telly and eat popcorn all day. You're doing magnificently. And I'm not joking. That was a long answer, Mary Ellen. Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, Venerable Robina.
Yes, in Bali. What are you doing in Bali, babe? You're in quarantine in Bali, are you?
Walking the path and listening to you a lot.
Okay, good, honey. I'm happy.
It's a great to be here with you. Now, look, a few questions and try and get it out and put the me out of it.
Okay, don't worry. Say it.
In regards to resolve,
yes,
you were emphasising a great deal. If almost what I was hearing was on the tendency to kill,
yes,
and to purifying the karmic seeds from killing, and then the of being killed or dying young. But are you using that as an example? Is killing so much more?
heavy.
Does it ripen more than, say, being a sex fiend or a drug addict or a thief?
I understand, Kath. No, okay. It's a very good question, actually. So I do use killing as an example. It's just an example but I remember one time, one Lama, he was asked, if you want to give just one piece of advice to people, what would it be? He said, don't try not to kill any living being. That's because, I mean, if we think about it, Kath, if we think about actions that harm others, I mean, I don't know, sometimes, I mean, maybe we kind of got a lot of heavy feelings about sex. And so we think of sexual violence as maybe worse than ordinary violence, but, you know, because it's about sex, you know, so we often think that's a really monstrous thing. And it is. I mean, it's not diminishing any other negativity. But if we think about killing, I've got a feeling it's the one that we think is the most shocking. I don't know. I'm not sure. Most shocking. Because I don't know, it's interesting, isn't it? And then we think about, forget humans, because mostly in our culture, and certainly with respect, I mean, I was a Catholic, and I love my Catholic upbringing. I really was a devoted Catholic. But I was taught that God made other creatures for our benefit, and they don't have souls, they don't go to heaven, and they're made by God for us. And I mean, that's quite an interesting concept. So in our culture, both first scientifically, we talk about creatures not having brains, therefore they don't suffer. Then we've got the Christian tradition going right back, you know, tracking right back to Jesus, where we don't say they've got souls. So there's a whole view that says that creatures don't matter. So in our culture, it's normal to slaughter. I mean, so many creatures for our benefit. We do this, and this is one of the heaviest things. I mean, forget just about humans, Kath. I mean, you know, I remember I always have the discussion about when people ask about eating meat. And I get my sense is because we have so much attachment to food, we make eating flesh of animals the worst action in the universe. Whereas, you know, I remember always quoting when I tell people, I remember quoting one in Melbourne, one ABC scientist who talked about this because I think he got fed up with all the fundamentalist vegans and vegetarians, always kind of whatever. And I'm talking about fundamentalists here, people telling people what to do. There's no question eating meat, the meat industry destroys the planet, right? This is called killing creatures. But the particular point he made was, you know, that this wheat field, I always quote this story, there's a particular wheat field, it must be everywhere the same on the planet, where they grow wheat. And what's wheat for? Well, 20% for the holy vegans and vegetarians. No, sorry, 20% for the bulls, for the meat eaters, and then 80% for the vegans and the vegetarians. And then when he said in the off season, there's millions of little mice gather there, little field mice. He had photos of them. He said they sing love songs together to each other. And then of course, when you have to grow the wheat, what do? You slaughter these millions of mice, but no one ever discusses that because we're not eating their little bodies. So it's like irrational. When we think about that we emphasize we shouldn't eat meat, the killing of creatures, it's right, we do kill so many creatures, but we can't survive on this planet. Everything is based upon the killing of creatures. Our body is a walking zoo. They're all living sentient beings with the Buddha. I mean, the creatures under my arm, in my body, breathing in creatures. You drive cars, you're killing trillions of bugs. So killing seems a really heavy action without even thinking about it. All sentient beings in the universe are slaughtered by each other. Look at the animal realm. They live in being killed or killing. So killing is the heaviest one of all. It's so powerful and so destructive. And if you just go more than humans, it's pervasive in the entire universe. So in a sense, killing is quite strong. Can you see my point? We do lie and steal and do other things as well, but the killing, and also because the killing, forget about killing for attachment, but the real heavy killing is from anger, and it's sort of evident as an emotion. Anger is the most powerful, you know. I mean, attachment, all of it comes from attachment. We do everything to get what I want, include harm others, but things done from attachment are negative, but things done from anger are much more destructive, much more violent. So I think if we look at it psychologically, logically, it makes sense. You know, the killing is heavier, and it's so pervasive for the entire universe. Whatever we do, just walking down the street being a nice person, we're slaughtering creatures. Driving a car, being a loving, kind person, driving carefully, you're slaughtering creatures. It's the nature of the universe, you know. Do you understand, Kath? Does it make sense?
It does, but it opens Pandora's box to about 100 other questions.
Yes, well, I know, but ask a couple, because we all have the same questions, Kath. It's really helpful. So ask the question.
Well, also in relation to, well, I mean, one question I write down is, why is the world so neurotic about food now? I mean, all these... No, it's good, Kath, it's a brilliant question. I know. Just everyone's intolerant of something. I mean, that's just... Right. Yeah.
No, it's attachment, Kath. Attachment for the Buddha is all the delusions. As we know, he talks about the three poisons, the three toxic emotions. The root of all this is this deeply primordial ego grasping that clings to the sense of a separate me, which is so subtle for us we can hardly see it. But on the basis of that, effectively, the main cause of all suffering in daily life for the Buddha, his analysis is really vast and extensive and quite deep. And it's not how we think in our world psychologically at all, because we take it as a given, but it's this bottomless pit of this emotional hunger of I want. And so it's the source of all the pain. And then when it doesn't get what it wants, that's what anger is. So we're living between this attachment and anger 1,000 times a day. And attachment, of course, at the very gross level, first of all, manifests as the objects of the senses. So that's why sexual violence is much heavier in our minds than regular. If your father beats you up every day, you're not going to have guilt and all that pain and hiding. But if it's sexual violence, there's extra torture mentally about it, because we've got attachment to sex, attachment to food, attachment to things, and that distorts our view hugely, you know. And then we've got attachment to my view, and we have aversion to your view. That's how we become fanatic and fundamentalist. We're right and you're wrong. So we can see how it all evolves from this attachment. It's very huge and pervasive in the way Buddhism describes it. It's very fascinating. Do you understand?
I do.
Good, Ron.
A little.
A little. Slowly.
Yeah.
Okay. So listen, sometimes it's helpful to read things. So if you want a few things to read, you can just email me and I can send you a few PDFs of this stuff that I'm talking about here written down. Maybe it's good to have for reference if you want to. So you just email me.
All right. That'd be great. I've got the email for Claire. Is that?
Who's Claire?
I don't rely on my memory.
My email, don't worry. You email me, honey, my full name, Robina Courtin, @mac.com, like the computer, @mac.com. My whole name with no full stops or anything. Just you email me. You can chat. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, sweetheart. Thanks, Kath. What else, people? Anything?
Venerable Robina, this is Christopher.
Christopher, hello, my dear.
Hello. So I'm very interested in the concept of living in vows. I'm new to Buddhism, so I'm not sure the logistics of it. Are you talking about the bodhisattva vows?
No. Good, Christopher. No, there's different in Buddhist practice, the whole path to enlightenment is divided into three levels of vows. Sort of the first level are known as the vows of individual liberation. They're the vows that help you get liberated from all the rubbish. And in usual terms, they're either the vows of a monk or a nun, or the vows of a lay person. And you take those when you formalize your refuge. When you usually become a Buddhist, you formalize it in a refuge ceremony with somebody, and then you can at the same time or later, you would take the 5 lay person's vows. And that's no killing, stealing, lying, cheating on your partner, or intoxicants. And you don't have to take all of these 5, but that's a traditional step when a person becomes formally a Buddhist, you know. And so you break killing in a major, they go into details. You take the vow never to kill any living being. And this is where it's a bit shocking for us. I mean, I know when the Dalai Lama gives these vows in big groups of Westerners or modern people in Dharamsala, he usually only gives it to not kill humans, because he knows that most Westerners can't handle the thought of never killing an ant or a cockroach, you know. But it's a very powerful one if we can do it. And the point about vows is, that I've found this, and they say this, that when you make the decision, I will not kill, then that guides your behavior. You will watch out for the cockroaches, you'll watch out for the ants. You mightn't like them so much, but you'll at least, because you know you want to keep your vow, because it's your commitment to yourself, it'll protect you from killing. It's very powerful in that way. So you make a vow not to kill any living being, and this is why it's important to do it every day, and then do the purification at the end of the day, because you're kind of cleaning up your act. And also when you do the vowing, when you do the 4 steps at the end of the day, especially the resolve one, when I will never kill again, that deepens the groove in your mind, and it strengthens your habit to not kill, because you've got the vow not to kill. And what that also does is protect you from even having to kill. I mean, I can say as a Buddhist, I've never met a situation yet when I've been forced to kill. And that's because of vows. The power of vows protect you. It makes you very conscious, you know. It's a bit like if you're driving, we don't think of when you drive a car that you're living in hundreds of vows. But if you start writing down all the things you've agreed not to do on the road, you'd have a list of 100 things. You've taken 100 vows. I will not go over 100 kilometers an hour. I will not put the brake on at the same time as accelerator. I won't turn left if I want to go right. We don't think of them as vows, but they're really clear instructions that we live according to, and they guide you when you drive. It's just like this. These vows for the Buddha are these commitments we take that produce the person we become, you know, so how to become a better person. Do you understand? So they play a major role in Buddhism. So you can take it formally if you have a teacher, you have a person, or you can, if you want to email me again, we can discuss it if you like, Christopher. You're very welcome.
I'd like that. Thank you.
Okay. What else, people? Where are you, Christopher? Where do you live?
Santa Fe.
Oh, okay. Okay then. Well, then Geshe-la here. You know Geshe-la here? You know the Geshe here?
Yes, very. Yes.
Okay then. Well, he gives, I'm sure, I don't know where's Mary? Where's Mary? Does he?
I'm right here.
Does Geshe-la give refuge and vows regularly at the center?
He does. It's once, he has in the past once a year. We haven't had any requests now.
Well, people can request. So Christopher, if you're in Santa Fe,
I'm
and you go to
requesting.
Santa,
Absolutely, people can request.
you should request if you know Geshe-la. Absolutely, don't email me instead. You can email me if you like.
Yes.
But absolutely, you request. People request. It's very important to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Christopher. Thank you so much. Who else? Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yes, Susie.
Hello. This is my first interaction with Buddhism other than
Okay.
reading. So
Oh,
I'm
my-
very, very new.
Okay. You jumped in the
And I
deep.
have, I jumped in, just learning a lot, and it's
Good.
really interesting and
Good, Susie.
great. I do have a question. I'm just really contemplating this idea of not lying.
Okay.
And I don't mean big lies. I mean, you know, in my day-to-day interaction, my job, everything I do, in the work that I do, there's a lot of elements of not
Right.
being totally honest. And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's something that really connected with me when you said that. And so my question to you is, what is a lie? How would you define a
Exactly.
lie?
It's a very good question, darling. So, you know, I know in many businesses, I mean, you can, especially these days, I mean, when you go onto websites and things these days, you just feel like you're drowning in confusion because you just know no one's ever telling you the truth. It's just all a lot of rubbish. And it's rampant right now. And I can imagine certain businesses. So lie, very specifically, is having the intention, and it's always based on your own attachment to get what you want. It's to your advantage. It's consciously saying something that isn't true, and then it's completed when the person hears it and is misled by you. That's a lie. So not lying doesn't mean not telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It means it's a conscious verbal thing. That's a lie. So, you know, like, if you don't want to tell your mother, let's say you're a Buddhist and you don't want to tell your mother you're a Buddhist. Are you a Buddhist? Oh, mummy, I think Buddhism is wonderful. You can answer in a way that's not hurting her and is not lying and is not for your own advantage. But you know, you can be skillful with words, but it's clear. You've got to be so clear about your motivation, especially if it's in your job.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be black and white. You've got to be skillful. But you have to be aware you don't want to mislead people. If you want to mislead people, and usually it's for profit, then that's really heavy, isn't it? You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's when you know it's saying words that aren't true, that based on the intention and the motivation, you know, it's for your advantage to get something,
Mm-hmm.
and the person hears it and believes you and is misled.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you get to the next level of vows, like I said, the first level, as I mentioned to Christopher, the next level of vows are part of the Mahayana path, Christopher, and that's the Bodhisattva vows. And they're the vows. So the first level of vows are like this first level of practice. It's for our benefit. It's protecting ourselves from creating negativity. We are the main beneficiaries. That when you get to the Mahayana path, the Bodhisattva vows are to help others, consciously help others. Well, at the Bodhisattva level, which is more powerful, we actually have a vow to break an earlier vow if it's truly for the benefit of others. And you can't play with that. So a person who's really got incredible compassion, Susie, you would lie consciously for the sake of the other person. Well, you can't play with that. You wouldn't play with that. It can only be of its benefit to the other person. And it's got to come from the purest motivation. Do you understand? At the more advanced level. Yeah. Makes sense, Susie, for your job?
Yeah. I work for the government, so.
Why would you have to lie? It depends on the department. What department do you work for?
I work for at the state level for the governor's office, and it's not lying.
So you mean
It's
like
just
politics, it's political.
it's politics, yeah. And so there is a level of discomfort and kind of greasiness that I get.
Stuff. Yeah, inflated. You're saying lots of inflated things, right?
Half truths. Yeah.
I know, you just got to be very skillful, and that's why.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, it's any job we do. If we really find it does, it does go against our ethics. We've got to make the choice. You've got to make the choice.
Yeah.
And have the courage to make the choice. And it's also very depressing if you're always saying half truths and sort of ramping on nonsense for people. They must be very exhausting.
especially right now, just so much uncertainty. You know, you can't say anything because you don't even know what the full context is.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly. Must be difficult. Well, Susie, be clear. Do your best.
mhm.
Have the wish to
Thank
help. Okay. What else,
Yes.
people? This is a very helpful question. What else, people? Got 15 minutes left.
Venerable Robina, we have a question that came up in the chat box. Can you
Yes.
hear me? This is Mary.
Yes, ma'am.
This is, someone wrote in saying, Venerable Robina, thank you so much for this Dharma. I'm in Portland, Oregon, amidst so much tension and conflict between protesters and the police. And I'm wondering, what is the right compassionate speech and action in relationship to what is happening?
Well, I mean, that has to be who you're speaking to, you know. I mean, if you want to go to the police station and say something to them, that's one answer. And if you want to go to the protesters and say something to them, that's another answer. And if you want to talk to your grandmother who, you know, who, let's say, hates protesters, then there's another answer. So it's very broad. And the question, I'm not trying to be tricky, but it's hard. I think the key thing is just, I mean, okay, before the words come out the mouth, there's got to be the attitude. So if, for example, we have the view of karma, if we have the view of karma, if we do have the view of karma, then we know the reason this is happening, and that helps us understand why, and then that will give us compassion. From the bigger picture point of view, have compassion. And that's probably the main thing, is to have some compassion, you know. Don't get too caught up in the political views. Yes, there's injustice, and yes, the police shoot people. We know all that's true, whatever, but it's to have some kind of compassion, you know, and not get overwhelmed by attachment and anger and rage, because that'll just destroy everything. So it's for our own sake to know why it's happening. And then if there is an issue there, to want to support that issue, but not out of anger, because that just destroys. I say that's the main thing, to keep our own minds steady. No matter how bad the situation is, no matter how unjust things are, and they're terrible, unjust things do happen, we've got to try and keep our equilibrium, understand karma, and not be angry. Try and not be angry, and therefore to try and have compassion for everybody, because everyone's causing suffering, you know. That's the best I can say. It's such a broad question, and I hope that helps. Mary? Mary can't hear me.
I don't have a response yet.
Okay, that's fine. Is there anyone else who'd like to ask a question before
Yes.
we finish our meditation?
Hello, it's me, Fernando. I
Hello,
have a question. Hello, Venerable Robina. So if someone, hello, Mary, if someone wants to rob you or kill you, and then you realize that it was because you did it in the past, if he ended up or she ended up doing it to you, and then you decided, you ended up doing all that purification where you're being killed, but then in the next life or in the next few lives, you might end up in the situation in which you're going to be or will be willing to kill that person. So the only way to not kill that person again or to rob that person again is to remember that, right? And so the only way
No, is that true?
become an area?
Why do you have to remember it, Fernando? I mean, let's just say you eat too much. Let's say you eat too much. Let's just say, Fernando, you eat too many M&Ms. Listen, just for a second. Let's say you eat too many M&Ms, Fernando. Keep your microphone on. I want to talk to you. Keep your unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Let's say you eat too many M&Ms and one day you come out with your skin problem. You come out with a skin problem. You come out with a skin problem. You don't have to remember which day and which M&M it was. You get the point. You can see the result, and you know that the result is from doing that thing. So the same here. You don't have to remember the day, but you know, guaranteed, if you've got the Buddhist view, you've had countless lives, you've done all of these actions. So if you fully regret because you're sick of suffering, and you have consciousness, and you have compassion, and you do the practice, and you vow never to do again, that's how you purify it. And you will meet that person again, but you'll have no wish to get killed, and you won't get killed, and you'll have no wish to kill them because you've purified it all.
Okay.
You see my point? It's
Yes,
the whole point.
yes. Now I understand it. I thought that in the end it was just going to be that you have to become an Arya to remember everything and then help that being.
No, of course, then yes, when you become an Arya, then you'll have compassion, then you'll be able to see everything, then you get helpful to others. But the purification process is for yourself right now. You're the beneficiary of this practice. Come on.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good, okay. What else? We can just, that's it. We can just, I think we just finish with we've done the practice in a sense by going through it. But why don't we just do if we can, the visualization part, and then just finish with the resolve part, and then we'll just dedicate. That'll do. And just be very relaxed and easygoing about it. We've done the regret. So thinking, okay, sorry. I'll go through the 4 steps very briefly again, based on what we've discussed. So just in your own mind, to the degree that it makes any sense, think these words that I'm saying. Make them your thoughts if they make sense. So we think, I regret whatever I've done in this life to use my body and speech to harm others. Whatever I've done out of my ignorance, harming the sentient beings, the killing, the stealing, the lying, the bad-mouthing, the cheating. And then, anything we've done in this life that was harm sentient beings, I regret. And the reason is because, you know what? I don't want those karmic seeds to ripen as my suffering. I'm sick of suffering. It's completely for my sake, this first level. I know I don't want future suffering. I know I don't like bad things happening. I know I don't want to get sick, be lied to, killed, stolen from, rejected, harmed by others. We know this. So I regret the actions that have caused that for my sake, because I'm sick of suffering. And then we think of anything, if we take the view of karma, whatever I have done in past lives, countless past lives, Buddha says, anything I've ever done since beginning of time to harm sentient beings, I regret from the depths of my heart, because I am sick of suffering. And then I regret also the states of mind, the attachment, the ignorance, the anger, these things that cause me to do these actions. They're the ones that they're the root of the problem. These I regret from the depths of my heart, because they're the cause of my doing things with my body and speech. They're the ones that cause me suffering. I'm sick of suffering. So now we think, whom can I turn to? So, in this case, we're using Buddha, but it's up to you to decide about that. If you haven't done it before, don't worry. So just visualize above our head this enlightened energy, white, blissful being. Just imagine that. If you're familiar with it, fine. If not, don't worry. I'm delighted to have a doctor, because we're talking Buddha's teachings here. So these are the remedies, Buddha's teachings. So we're so delighted to have a doctor to rely upon. And then we think of compassion now for those we've harmed, all the creatures we've killed without realizing. All the creatures we've harmed, all the sentient beings, the killing, the stealing, the lying, the beings we've harmed. Since beginning this time, I must purify for their sake. I must be of benefit to them, not harm them. So I have compassion for every sentient being I've harmed. And if we can, think of those who've harmed us. If we can. Such compassion for them, simply because they will suffer in the future for their actions. That's the reason to have such compassion for all of us. Third step, we do the remedy. So just imagine, just use our creative imagination, okay? Just visualize nectar pouring out from the heart of Buddha. He sends like this, he's sitting above our head facing the same way. And we visualize this kind of like this hose of energy coming around. We'll just do a very simple one. Entering into us completely, this nectar filling us completely, blissful and powerful liquid energy, purifying all the actions we've ever done with our body and speech and mind that have harmed others and that have caused us to do those things. Completely purifying, all this nectar pouring out through the lower parts of our body, disappearing into space, purifying all the karmic imprints of all the harm we've ever done to sentient beings and to ourselves, including the delusions. Completely purifying all of this. Imagine this. And we'll just say the mantra 3 times. Just visualize the nectar filling you. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sutokayo Mebawa Suposhayo Mebawa Anurato Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasa Savakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabha Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sutokayo Mebawa Suposhayo Mebawa Anurato Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasa Savakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabha Mahasama Sattva Ahung Pe Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupala Vajrasattva Teno Patita Dido Mebawa Sutokayo Mebawa Suposhayo Mebawa Anurato Mebawa Sarva Siddhi Me Prayasa Savakama Sutsame Siddham Shriyam Kuru Hong Ha 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 Ho Bhagavan Sarva Tathagata Vajramame Mutsa Vajrabha Mahasama Sattva Ahum pear. Pretty full of this nectar. Imagine totally purified all those imprints. How marvelous. So the fourth step, we do our best. If we've taken vows already, we will reiterate those vows. I will never kill. I will never lie. I will never steal. That strengthens the groove, that digs the groove deeper in our mind, strengthens that habit. But if we haven't taken the vows and we have never thought of these things before, maybe we can think, well, that's an interesting thought. I might think about not killing and think about not lying and think about not stealing again. Maybe I'll try it out for 24 hours. Make that decision, you know, decide. So in your own mind, make some decisions based on your own practice, your own level, and what decisions you think, what timeline you can give yourself for any of your habits. Just think for a couple of minutes. Decisions to not do again for 1 hour, 1 day, whatever you think. So then we imagine, just imagine now the Buddha melts into light and dissolves into us. Just imagine that. Okay, very delighted. And we just make the decision. We just conclude, we just dedicate. We're thinking this hour and a half we've been together, as many thoughts as there have been, as many seeds we've planted. So we're going to nourish these seeds from this moment forward at whatever level of practice we have, make sense of whatever we've listened to attempt to grow our minds, to lessen our negativity and grow our marvelous potential for our sake and the sake of others, thinking like this. Jang chob sem chog rinpoche, ma ke panam ke gyo chig, ke panyam pa me pa yang, gong ne gong du pelva shog. Okay. So Mary, did we do course notes for all this? I forget. Did we do course notes for the week? Mary?
No, we did not. No, we did not.
Oh, I was meant to. Well, I'm going to send them then. I'll send teachings. I'll send PD. I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. I completely forgot. That's terrible. I'll send some course notes, including these purification practice and the teachings about purification and the teachings about karma. I'll send notes and people can have those PDFs. I'll do one for tablets and a PDF and one for a phone. So you can download them all. I'm so sorry. I meant to do that. Okay, everybody. That's it. We're done.
Thank you so much.
All right. Christopher, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Fernando, thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you.
Tina.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you.
Thank you, darlings. Good night.
Thank you.